Hi, I'm Samar. I'm managing partner at Changes Immigration, and today I'm delighted to welcome Ian Smith of Frusion to talk about sponsor compliance and Frusion's experience with recent visit from the Home Office. Ian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, no problem at all. My name's Ian Smith. I run two music agencies, Frusion and Fission. I've done for around 20 years and had a sponsor license since 2009. In fact, from the year it actually started. I also, just to full transparency, for 8 years I was national chair of one of the UK Musicians Union sections. I'm also one of the campaigners for Carry On Touring, the campaign post-Brexit trying to make things a little easier. You may have seen us in the news and where we went to Parliament with Tim Brennan. I do a lot of things, so I'm a campaigner as well, but that's a side thing. So that's me. The two agents, sorry, forgot to say, the two agencies work with artists across the world. On the books, around 300, everything from Phil Rudd from AC/DC to Francesca Cagnon on Cirque du Soleil. So it's quite a broad range, including people you've never heard of.
Fantastic. So, why don't you tell us a bit about your recent experience with the sponsor compliance unit?
Sure. To also, what I should have said is I've done a lot of research over the years, having created a channel on YouTube and also a website called ukeartswork.info. So what I'm going to say now is informed by a lot of research, which includes a lot of research on compliance for creative arts sponsors. Now, for those of you that don't know, UKVI have not engaged with the music industry since 2012, where they used to have a task force and used to talk to us all the time about the ins and outs of being a creative sponsor, and whereby some elements of what we do are totally different to elements throughout the rest of the sponsorship ecosystem. In particular, the certificate of sponsorship concession for non-visa nationals is the only concession anywhere within the system that allows someone to come into the UK to work just on a certificate of sponsorship if they are a non-visa national. It's the only one. And it often confuses auditors coming in about they don't realize. Anyway, my experience has been this. I've had three audits in total over the years. I had one recently in July of 2024, depending on when you're watching this. And it was quite a long time between the audit and the actual decision. And remember, I'm very, very well informed. I've read all the guidance manuals, believe it or not, which is quite a feat in itself. And also, before the audit, I checked some of the main points again. However, when the auditors came, very pleasant people, they were not aware of several key aspects of creative arts sponsorship, which are totally different to any others. We'll talk about it a little later. One of which was adherence to the Working Time Directive and UK minimum wage.
Yes. So why is it that those are not relevant for the type of sponsorship that you engage in, Ian?
Sure. Well, in actual fact, I'm a third party sponsor, but I work as either an agent bringing people into the UK to work, musicians. I actually sponsor drag artists, speakers, wrestlers, who also come under arts, believe it or not, not sport, if they're in the ring. So the reason that this is different is that when people come into the UK as creative artists to work at a venue, there is no employer-employee relationship between the venue and the artist. And that's same for me. I'm not the employer in ever when I sponsor a person to come in. Neither are the venues or the other sponsors that sponsor those people. There is no employer-employee relationship. Therefore, under the regulations, everyone is self-employed. Now that means, of course, that if you're self-employed, the Working Time Directive and UK minimum wage does not apply. However, I should say this, as Samar knows from our conversations, one of the auditors who came to see me would not believe this was the truth. And I had to go through quite a lot of explanation during the audit, but also after the audit because they suspended my license briefly. This was one of the main reasons for suspension, and it's only by arguing, showing law and showing the regulations and showing the UKVI's own guidance that we were able to clarify that point, and it was vindicated. So, if you, as a creative arts sponsor, unless you are directly employing, for example, a musician, if you're someone like Liverpool Philharmonic or something like that, and you're employing a musician on a contract for the Philharmonic, then that is an employer-employee situation. But in every other respect, when you are a creative arts sponsor, you do not have that employer-employee relationship. Therefore, working time directive and UK minimum wage do not apply. But it was a really hard-fought battle to
That's
get them
right.
to
Yeah.
apply.
So
Yeah,
they, when they came to visit, they didn't appreciate that that was the case, the distinction between self-employed people being
yeah,
sponsored as creative workers and workers under, the UK employment law framework. And even when you argued that point during the audit itself, when the letter came from the Home Office in respect of the audit, they went ahead and suspended the license, as you said briefly. And one of the points raised, one of the reasons given for suspension was this lack of compliance with working time directive and national minimum wage. And so we successfully argued the point about self-employment. And
yeah.
there was one other point that was at issue that we successfully argued about sponsoring people as a unit rather than as
Correct.
individuals. Do you want to speak to that a bit, Ian?
I will, and just to explain for creative arts sponsors, but the reality is when UKVI recently, Home Office recently changed on the SMS, you'll see at the bottom of the SMS, um, say how you have ensured that the worker coming in will make a unique contribution to creative life in the UK. Now, that's important. The reason it's important is this: you have to prove that the person coming in is a genuine musician, dancer, etc., and you've complied with the codes of practice for everything except music. There is no code of practice for music. Therefore, how do you do this? Well, you have to do it by showing that they have an established reputation already as an international artist or an artist, even if they've not traveled beyond the borders of their own country. So you do that via web searches, newspaper articles, etc., etc. The auditor, in my case, insisted that incorrectly insisted that each person in a group had to have that status. And that's not true. What has to be true is that the group has status. So I asked the guy in question, okay, who's the bass player for Bon Jovi? Do you know? Who's the guitarist? Who's the keyboard player? And you don't necessarily know. And in fact, somebody like Bon Jovi, they would be internationally famous anyway. But if it if you're sponsoring somebody as a group, a unit group, and that's within the legislation and the guidance, you merely have to show that they have, as a group, international reputation. It is not true that each individual has to show that they are famous in their own right, because that would include things like sound engineers, guitar technicians, backline technicians. It's totally incorrect. So we had this big argument, and I showed them various people, but the argument was that I had not shown that each individual was international, had an international reputation. I'm being careful with my words because I'm trying to be very accurate in what I'm saying to you, given the format, not the format, given the forum we're speaking in now. So one thing I would say beyond all this is knowledge is absolute power, but having the confidence to argue these points is really important. And you will only have that confidence if you've actually done the research. The argument I had with the auditor, he would not even accept that self-employed people did not come under national minimum wage and working time directive. I had to show him in front of him on my computer the UK government website stating that self-employed people did not come under national minimum wage.
And
The
yet,
only
and
reason,
yet
sorry,
that point was still relied on in the letter. Yeah,
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 the only reason I'm making this point is that when they double down on you, you almost feel gaslit and you feel, are they trying to trip me up? Are they trying to it's a little bit like a police interrogation in some ways. Are they trying to find a way to show that your answers are inconsistent?
yeah.
It's,
I think though, really,
I'm being perhaps
they're
too,
just misapplying skilled worker
yeah,
requirements to the creative worker framework.
correct.
I don't think that it's malicious or
No,
intentional even, but it's not, they're not necessarily always properly trained to assess creative worker sponsors.
I think what the point was, it's how you feel, not, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
how I felt in that situation.
yeah.
The audit was quite friendly. I've some of the one I've had three in total. One was a delight, one was painful, and this one was quite bizarre, really. And was not expecting the letter that I got, which was a suspension letter. I was maybe expecting a downgrade letter. But the suspension letter came as a very big surprise. Now, fortunately, because of my particular situation and my researchers and my level of expertise in this and my fighting spirit, as Samar can attest to, then I wasn't going to let it go. But I could have lost my license had I not had that knowledge, which is really important. The other thing I want to say, as Samar's just alluded to, is that the auditors don't have this training. The and they've not engaged with the creative arts industry since 2012. I mean, I say they, that's UKVI. There used to be a task force for music, and whereby there were regular meetings between UKVI and creative sponsors and music industry, where we could iron out these problems and say, this is ridiculous. You cannot apply national minimum wage and working time directive. It doesn't work. And they go, oh yes, okay. And then they'd send that information through to the audit teams and compliance. So what we're working with, I won't say fighting, but we're working with is a lack of knowledge within UKVI about our particular sector, the creative arts sector, and it's very specialized in terms of the way in which we work, in terms of bringing in workers for some often very short periods of time. There's one other thing I'd like to say, Samar, because this was something that was said in audit. Um, there was also a question of tracking people. Um, as some of you'll know, if you're issuing multiple entry certificates of sponsorship, not on a visa, but for non-visa nationals, you can come in for a few days, go out again, come in, etc., over the period of time as an obviously maximum 90 days. And the auditor was absolutely insistent on this, and it was reflected slightly in the decision letter in that I should have been tracking people all the time when they were not working. So that meant not just in the UK, but when they were outside the UK. That is also incorrect. So if that ever comes up in your audit, that's not true. It's not in the advice, it's not in the guidance. But he was totally convinced, and it was reflected in the decision letter. So all I would say in conclusion for this bit is that try to maintain your confidence, remain calm as if you can, and and as Samar said, I don't think they're deliberately trying to provoke you into a mistake, but they will ask searching questions and check that you're consistent in what you've said. And if you have the knowledge, you'll be consistent.
Thanks so much, Ian. So do you have any other final words of advice to a creative worker sponsor who receives notification that they're going to have an audit or receives a suspension letter? Maybe you could speak to some of the support you relied on.
Sure.
Well,
Reflecting Dad's army, don't panic. if you're that old and you remember Dad's Army. Don't panic, don't panic. Um, the main thing is to find good advice. Now, I worked very closely with Samar on this because we'd known each other from other work we'd done together outside, totally outside this. I also had a very, very good friend, whose name I won't mention because it's not fair to do that in a public forum, who is a real expert in this and has been working with UKVI for years as a creative arts sponsor and consultant. It's important to reach out. Don't stay out there on your own. Speak to someone. Samar is an ideal person. I'm not being paid for this, by the way. Just be clear. I'm just delighted to help and you guys generally.
Thank you,
And I would,
Ian.
no, not at all. I would say please reach out to people who know what they're doing. You probably know what you're doing, but you need that support. And there's a support network of people out there who really do know how this works and sometimes need to make that clear to UKVI who don't always know. You have to remember UKVI is a very big organization and within the management structures from auditor to senior management, etc., things can get missed. Things can be misunderstood. Law can be misunderstood. That happens all the time, of course. So don't sit there on your own. Reach out and try and get some help.
Yeah, I think we made a great team in
Absolutely.
objecting to the Home Office's sponsor compliance activity in this matter. We have a very good track record of maintaining sponsor licenses, and your experience and expertise, combined with my experience of these challenges, I think, and the input of your contact was really powerful. I
Sure.
would suggest, if I may, that people do act as quickly as possible if they're notified. Um,
Sorry. Yeah, I forgot to say that. Don't hang around. I spent a couple of days thinking about this, then I reached out to Samar from the decision letter point. You only have 20 days, 20 working days, so be quick, be really quick. And reach out to other sponsors as well, if you happen to know them. And please, one thing I would say is your custom and practice might not be the best. We can all improve, but check carefully the absolute base requirements of what you're supposed to be doing in terms of record keeping. And then when you're in that situation, then you're in a much better place. But certainly reach out to people like Samar,
yeah.
etc.
And if you're concerned about your processes or records, in advance of being contacted by the Home Office, particularly if you applied for your sponsor license without assistance from an immigration lawyer, or you've had your license for a while and you haven't been audited, then it might be a good idea to preemptively have somebody review your processes and records, which, we'd be happy
Totally.
to
In
change.
fact, there's one thing I'd like to say as Samar's just said that. What's missing in this whole equation is there's no training for the officers coming to audit you. There's no training for you. They just say read the guidance. And then it is so easy to misinterpret some of the things in that guidance.
Yeah.
And it's massive anyway. So Samar makes a great point. Audit, check your processes with someone like Samar and then make sure that you're as compliant as you can be. And if not, and you've made some mistakes, then address them before the audit so that you can make that point if asked a particular question.
All right. Thank you so much, Ian.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate your taking the time to talk to me today. And I hope that this is useful to other creative worker sponsors facing similar situations.
Pleasure. And I'm happy to have been able to help, and my experience hopefully will be of help to others.
Thanks so much.